And hello, we are with Mr. Robert Hooks today, and I want to thank you so much for spending some time with us. And we'd like to say congratulations on the 50th anniversary of the Negro Ensemble Company.
Indeed.
Yes, but before we get into the NEC, Robert, let's talk about the DC Rep, because I have a connection there.
Okay.
You and I are both from Washington, D.C.
Yes, indeed.
Yes, I was born and raised
My
there.
homie.
Homie, yes.
My homie.
Well, were you the only founder, or was there someone else with you founding the DC Black Repertory
No,
Company?
I'm the only founder of the DC Black Rep.
Okay.
Right. I was going to say the Negro Ensemble Company. There were three of us, and then I went to Washington and did it by myself.
Okay, very good.
Now I had lots of help doing it, but the founding of it was mine and mine alone. Yes.
Now, before we get to the help, people helping you form the DC Black Repertory Company, let's talk about the social crisis, what was going on in Washington at that time that conceived the DC Black Repertory Company.
Let me tell you how it all started. I was living in New York and working in New York. I was doing a play on Broadway, and I was also doing a television series at the time.
What series was that?
It was called NYPD. NYPD, and I believe I was doing, can't remember the play on Broadway. Maybe it was Hallelujah Baby, or maybe a couple before that. But anyway, I was working in New York, and I had done a lot of television, and you know, I was a so-called celebrity, and I had done Washington, D.C. well. Everybody talked about the hometown boy doing well in movies and in television and on stage. So I was in New York on that day that they killed Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. I was in New York, I was working, and we were all, needless to say, heartbroken, devastated that they murdered Dr. Martin Luther King, who I knew, who had encouraged me to do the things that I was doing in the community. And I got a phone call late one night from Petey Greene. You know who Petey Greene is.
Of course.
He was a folk hero.
Iconic Washington,
yes,
D.C. broadcaster in radio and TV.
Right, exactly. Petey, who I grew up with, I mean, I used to shoot his dice for him back in the back alleys.
Is that right?
Yes, he would always, when he'd come around the block, Newport Place, he would always have me throw his dice for him in the day. Because I'd throw 7s and 11s.
Oh, my goodness, okay.
So anyway, Petey called me. He was in the office of Walter Washington, I believe was at the time. He became the mayor later, but at the time he was the commissioner, the city commissioner. And he got on the phone and he said, "Mr. Hooks, you got to come down here. They're burning your hometown to the ground." And the next day, I was on the train going to Washington, D.C. to help keep our people off the streets, keep them from burning and breaking into their own places. Black-owned places were being burned, and the city was on fire. And it wasn't just Washington, D.C. When they shot Martin Luther King, 100 cities around the country were rioting, and Washington, D.C. was one of them. So I went the next day. I helped them as much as I could. And on the way back, after I watched my city and your city burning, right, I thought, I got to do something. I have to do something. Now, I had already started the Negro Ensemble Company in New York, which brought so many people together of all different ethnicities and different backgrounds under one roof to see black art. It just did so much for the communities around New York. All of the boroughs of New York really supported the Negro Ensemble Company because it was what it was. It was an opportunity to be able to see black writers and artists and directors and dancers and actors do their thing. So I thought on the train ride back, I needed to do something. So when I got back, I knew what I needed to do. I needed to come back home to Washington, D.C. and start a black cultural institution. That's what was needed in order to heal the city, which was completely torn apart. So I did. I came back, I packed my bags, I got my producers. By that time, by the time I moved back, I had already closed my show on Broadway and the series was over as well. I asked Douglas Turner Ward and Jerry Crone if I could just take leave from the Negro Ensemble Company and go back home and build what we had built in New York, in Washington. And so I did. I moved back home and put an amazing company together. And that was, of course, I had already done it in New York. So, it was a nonprofit organization. I had a wonderful board of just fantastic people, city officials, civic people, a small board, like 7 or 8 people, but people that could help me in my mission and my concept work.
Now, where was the DC Black Repertory Company located at that time?
We were located on Georgia Avenue and Farragut Street, right down from Howard University, but in the black community, which is where I wanted to be. Now, Zelda Fitchandler down at the arena stage offered me to move my theater company into her facility, but I wanted it to be in the black community.
Sure.
And so I thanked her.
For obvious reasons,
sure.
Yeah.
That's what was the reason for doing it.
To heal,
so,
yeah.
Right. And so I thanked her, and she became a tremendous supporter of the company. But I moved it into the black community, and we were located on Georgia Avenue and Farragut Street.
Now, there are some iconic names and groups that have come out of that theater. One that I know directly, and that's Dr. Bernice Johnson Regan.
Mm-hmm.
She came out of the the DC Black Repertory Company.
She did.
And talk about some of the other people.
Well, first let me talk about Bernice.
Bernice,
right.
Okay,
Let
fine.
me talk about Bernice because there's always been a kind of not even a controversy. But Bernice Regan, I hired Bernice because she was working at the Smithsonian at the time, and I needed a vocal musicologist. I needed somebody that really knew how to work with voices, how to really assemble and work with actors and teach them how to use their voices, and also teach them music, right?
Yes.
That was the person. And Van Tile Whitfield, who I had brought in from the National Endowment for the Arts, who is also a Washington, D.C. guy, who was my artistic director. So I brought him in, and then I went to find somebody like Bernice, and there was Bernice. So I brought Bernice in to the DC Black Repertory Company to be the musical workshop director.
I see.
Working with all the actors in the company.
So whatever plays you did at the DC Black Repertory Company, Bernice was the musical director for all the plays, or
not all the plays, because all plays don't have music.
Sure.
Right. She ran the workshop. Okay. Her job was to teach the artists how to use their voices, what music was all about as it related to theater. She is a genius because she's a musicologist,
yes,
right?
Yes.
Well, while she was working in the music workshop, which she was directing for us, she decided she had all these great voices. She decided she had this a cappella kind of concept in her head from listening to these incredible women sing. The Carol Maylars, the Louise Robinsons of the company. And so she decided that she was going to put a group together. And she did indeed pick the best singers out of that workshop, and she called them Sweet Honey in the Rock.
Sweet Honey in the Rock.
That's where Sweet Honey in the Rock started, at the DC Black Repertory Company's music workshop.
Fantastic.
That history is hidden from the world, and I have no idea why. Because when it happened and Sweet Honey became famous, Bernice and the singers would talk about the DC Black Rep all the time. And then when they became really famous and going all over the world and whatever, then all of a sudden we couldn't hear the DC Black Repertory Company.
Right, exactly.
So I just want to make that point.
Okay.
That Sweet Honey in the Rock started as a result of the DC Black Repertory Company.
Well, thank you so much for that history, for putting that there. What about some other groups? What about some other actors that came out of the DC Black Repertory Company?
Well, there was Charlie Brown, who was just a wonderful actor. There was Lynn Whitfield, Carol Maylard, Smokey Stevens, Jay Stewart. Bill J was the Negro Ensemble Company. I get confused when I talk about my companies.
Sure, the two companies are similar, right?
Well, you know, and they're also my companies.
Yes,
and I
your
get
companies,
confused.
yes.
Many more actors came, famous actors, came through the Negro Ensemble Company, but a lot of them came through the DC Black Repertory Company.
Now,
and that's why I wanted to start it, to create opportunities, platforms for these talented people who would not have done what they did and are still doing if it were not for the DC Black Repertory Company.
One other person that I would like to mention in this taping is someone that we know together is Augie Osbourne, photography.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
I understand that he got his start there too. He came through the DC Black Repertory Company.
Yes, I mean Augie Osbourne. Augie was always around because he befriended a lot of the technical people. He was always around the theater, and we needed a sound person at one point. And Augie volunteered to work on sound. So that's how he became involved at the DC Black Rep on the sound crew backstage when we did, you know, we had lots of sound in all of our productions. And so, and then that was, I think, even before he became a famous photographer. He was our staff photographer, it turned out. There was another a photographer that we had hired before Augie. I can't remember his name right now, but Augie was just shooting everything.
Really?
So he became our staff photographer as well.
Oh, fantastic. Now, you put your...
Rudy Darden was the other. Rudy Darden was the other photographer that we brought on. This was before Augie, and then I don't know what happened with Rudy, but Augie was doing most of the photography.
So the workshop those were conducted at the Georgia Avenue and Farragut Northwest place?
Eventually, but before the Georgia Avenue and Farragut Street Theater opened, and we had to redo the theater, we had to remodel the theater. Before we did that, we had to have our training space, our workshops.
Exactly.
And thank God for a savior for the DC Black Repertory Company. He's gone now, but if it were not for him, there was no way I could pull it off. Ed Murphy. Ed Murphy Supper Club.
The owner of the Ed Murphy Supper Club.
Ed Murphy Supper
on Georgia
Club.
Avenue.
Ed Murphy became a dear, dear friend. The day I came back to help quell the riot, Ed Murphy, that's when I met Ed Murphy. And from that point on, and when I came back to do the company, this man gave me a warehouse next to his restaurant where he had all of his foodstuffs and all this. He just moved us into another place and gave me and the DC Black Repertory Company training program, which at that point was about maybe 50 young artists. He gave us a warehouse next to his supper club to train.
Wow.
This is before we were ready to move into the Old Colony Theater, which was the name of the...
On Georgia Avenue.
On Georgia Avenue. That was our home.
Fantastic.
But before our home, we had a home before that.
Okay.
And thanks to Ed Murphy, who's gone now, but he was, if it were not for Ed Murphy, there would be no DC Black Repertory Company, because I had no place to go. I hadn't gotten the grants yet to make this thing work. And he knew that. Ed Murphy, I had meetings with foundations and city people and civic people and government people. Ed Murphy had a special table in his restaurant where I could have all my meetings. He would serve food to these people. He never charged me a dime for it. And that's where I would have my important meeting. This was very impressed. They were very impressed. Oh yeah, Robert Hooks is going to be meeting at Ed Murphy Supper Club. Going to meet with Robert Hooks at Ed Murphy Supper Club. Ed Murphy never charged me a dime. And we ate his food, drank his liquor, and his soda pops and his tea or whatever. I didn't, but, well, yes I did too. But it was Ed Murphy. And that's where we started our training program. And then when we were finished, rebuilding and renovating the theater, which was done by my brother, who was an architect and was the theater builder, my brother James Walter Hooks, Jimmy Hooks. Jimmy Hooks renovated the Old Colony Theater and made it, because it was a movie house. He renovated it, built a 2-story dressing room area. Oh, it was amazing, because he was just brilliant, and he was happy that his brother came back home to build this incredible community.
Is he still with us?
He's still with us.
Fantastic.
2 of us left, 2 boys, the 2 of us, and then I have a sister who's still left as well. So there are 3 of us, but the rest are gone. But yeah, Jimmy was our architect, our theater builder, and he also built the sets for our plays.
Wow.
Oh, he was amazing.
Okay.
And he's still with us, yes.
That's fantastic. Well, let's talk about some of the plays that were put on at the Old Colony Theater. The Colony Theater in Washington, D.C. on Georgia Avenue was the home base for your plays.
It was home base for everything.
The home base for the DC Black Repertory Company.
Yes.
Very good.
All of the workshops.
Okay.
We would then, once it was done, finished being renovated by my wonderful brother, then we moved everything from the Ed Murphy warehouse uptown, up the street. So it was actually it was a few blocks up from Ed Murphy's supper
great.
club.
The Ed Murphy Supper Club was located on Georgia Avenue, right across the street from Howard University.
Actually, it wasn't right across the street from Howard University. It was practically on the campus of Howard University. It was on the same side of the street where the campus was.
Okay.
And it was the Freedman Hospital was there, and the Wonder Bread, that big Wonder Bread company was there.
You could smell the bread from miles away.
Right, exactly. That's where Ed Murphy's club was.
Exactly.
A supper club. Actually, that was the second version of Ed Murphy's Supper Club. The first version was across the street, and there was a kind of a junkyard across the street. This is long before you were born, dear. And that's where his original Ed Murphy Supper Club was. Then he moved across the street, and that's where his club was. And then after that, he built the first black hotel in Washington, D.C. The Harambe House. That was Ed Murphy.
Oh, I thought that was Howard University's endeavor.
No, they took it after Murphy gave it up. But Ed Murphy built the Harambe House. He built it. He raised the money for it and all. He couldn't hang with it because it became a problem with a lot of taxes or whatever. And he finally ended up giving it or selling it to Howard University.
Oh, fantastic.
And they used it as a training for hotel management.
For business, for business students.
But no, Ed Murphy built the Harambe House.
Okay.
I saw it built from the ground up, and it was wonderful.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, WHUR used to do, when Howard took it over, WHUR radio station used to have live radio broadcasts from there as well.
See, I was gone by that time.
Exactly, yeah. We're talking about
you had to
80s,
be talking
90s.
about after 77, because I left in 77.
You left in 77?
Right. I left right after Robert Jr. was born.
Okay.
I had already built the company. It was going strong, going great. Van Tile Whitfield was there as the artistic director.
Okay.
And Bernice was still there, and they were doing their thing. And just like I could leave the Negro Ensemble Company because I had the right people in place, I left the DC Black Repertory Company and moved out here to Los Angeles.
Fantastic.
As soon as I hit the streets, everybody was saying, "Oh, you're going to build a theater company out here? You're going to build?" No.
You didn't want to do that out here?
Well,
no?
I mean,
you were busy
I would have
out here
done
with TV and film.
Well, I would have. I came out here to work as I had been doing, work in film and television, because I had a brand new baby and a brand new marriage.
Yeah.
And I was spoiled by Los Angeles. Okay. So we moved out here in 1977. But the DC Black Repertory Company was going strong when I left, because that's the reason I could leave. You know, Van Tile was there as the artistic director with a great staff of people that he and I put together, so I could leave, and I did.
Well, fantastic. Well, let's talk about the productions that were put on there. Give us some of the more noted ones. Let's talk about some of the first ones.
Well, the first play that we did was a play called Changes. It was a musical. Okay. It was a neighborhood kind of musical. It was hardcore musical that Van Tile wrote the screenplay, wrote the play, and Lynn Whitfield's father Lynn Whitfield, who was a part of the company.
Yes.
This is before the big movie star thing.
Yes, yes.
And I'm happy for her. I love her. She's wonderful, and she
great.
deserves.
She's one of my favorite, Lynn Whitfield.
She deserves every bit of success that she gets. But she was there as a member of the DC Black Repertory Company workshop and repertory acting group, and that's where she met Van Tuyl, and they ended up getting married there. But her father, who was a dentist in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, which is where I met Lynn Whitfield when she was 13 years old.
My goodness.
And I had no idea I would end up bringing her into a theater company.
Wow.
But when she was 13 years old, I was in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, doing a movie called Hurry Sundown with Otto Preminger.
Sure.
And her father wrote some of the music for the movie. His name was Valerian Smith. He was a dentist, but he was also a composer, fantastic composer.
Wow.
He wrote two of the songs for Hurry Sundown.
My goodness.
Years later, when I started the DC Black Rep and brought Lynn into the fold, her father and I were friends from back in the day.
Yes.
And so I knew he was a musician, so I asked him to come in and write the music. Or we asked him, because Van Tuyl was running the theater because he was the artistic director.
Yeah.
Brought Valerian in to write the music for Changes, which was, I think, the first big play that we did. I think we did a Joseph Walker play. We did some of the big plays.
But the Blacks, that was a noted one.
Yeah, but the Blacks was not done at the Colony Theater. The Blacks was done. I produced and directed the Blacks with the Kennedy Center, down at the Kennedy Center.
But the DC Black Repertory Company,
right,
they put it on.
We produced it with the Kennedy Center.
Okay.
But it wasn't done at the Colony.
Okay.
And it was done actually as a benefit.
Okay.
Thank goodness Roger Stevens, who was gone now, but he was the head of it, and we were old friends. And I told him I wanted to do something special, and he allowed me to produce the Blacks there.
Okay, so you were solely artistic director of the DC Black Repertory Company. You didn't do any acting in any of the plays?
No, I wasn't the artistic director of the DC.
The founder, the founder.
And I was the founder, but I was the executive director.
Okay.
Van Tuyl Whitfield was the artistic director. I brought him on because I needed a Douglas Turner Ward type of playwright, a person that's done theater all their lives, which Douglas had, and so Van Tuyl.
Okay.
So I brought Van Tuyl in to really basically artistically run the company.
Okay.
You know, I signed off on everything, but he selected the plays that we did for the most part. He selected the plays.
But you didn't act in any of them?
I didn't act in any of that. No, I don't. That's not why I start theater companies.
Okay.
I don't start them to act in them. As a matter of fact, I had to fight Douglas Turner Ward off when we started the NEC because he wanted me to act in every. I said, Doug, that's not why we started the company. My career is fine. I mean, I don't need to act. You know,
right.
These other people, we set this up to create opportunities for other actors and directors and writers and choreographers and dancers, not me. So no, I don't act in.
So to wrap it up, what happened to the DC Black Repertory after you came out to Hollywood?
It still it had to move from the Colony Theater. And it had to change its name, the same as I'll tell you about the Negro Ensemble Company. Once the original company is dissolved and the people that are still there want to keep the original company, they have to change the name. Now, we decided that the DC Black Repertory Company would be, they decided on the new name, and they call it the Black Rep Inc. But my concept, my mission, was my mission, my concept. The same thing happened in New York. You know. Other people come to take it over, and they think differently. They have different creative minds, so they do it differently.
Now,
I was leaving.
A Soldier's Play, was that NEC?
Yes.
That was NEC.
Right.
Well, very good.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for sharing this history of the DC Black Repertory Company, Robert Hooks.
My pleasure.
Oh, thank you so much. And stay with us because now we're going to go into the NEC history.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay with me.
Great.